today's topic of our Legal Lowdown series is startup essentials. So this is really focused on folks that are thinking about starting a business, or maybe they've already started a business of some kind, and they're along the way to some extent. We think there's going to be some helpful information in here. We'll offer some tools and tactics for your new business. So a little bit about me. My name is Mike Fiffik. I'm the managing member of Fiffik Law Group, and I have been advising small business owners for over 32 years. And I've advised businesses in all stages of their life cycle, from startup to formation, growth, maturity, expansion, and even exit. And succession planning is certainly something that there are lots of small business owners should be thinking about along the way. But we have represented many different types of businesses, and just a few of them are listed in my bio there. But we've talked to lots of different small business owners and have lots of experience to bring to bear for your small business, right? You don't have to make lots of mistakes as a small business owner. The smartest business owners are the ones who try to avoid the mistakes. And what better way to avoid mistakes but to connect with us and or work with a small business attorney in your area, wherever it is that you are, because they have helped lots and lots of other businesses avoid mistakes, fix mistakes, and they can bring all of that experience to help you avoid mistakes and be a little bit more efficient. We have offices on both sides of Pennsylvania, in the Pittsburgh area and also in Radnor, which is suburban Philadelphia. But we represent businesses all over the state. It doesn't matter where they are. We represent businesses basically in every county of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So let's talk a little bit about what our agenda is going to be today. First, I'm going to talk with you about business planning and how really important it is to engage in, not only when you're considering a startup, but it can be anywhere along the way in your path, right? Business planning is something that you never stop doing as a small business owner. We engage in business planning towards the end of every year to plan for what's going to happen in the following year. So business planning, super important. I'm going to give you a structure on how to do some business planning. We're going to talk about business partners. And if your plan includes taking on a partner or starting a business with a partner, we'll talk a little bit about the things that you should be thinking about in that regard. We'll talk about legal structures, so common legal structures for your business and the pros and cons for each, with a particular bent towards those folks who might want to take on investors at some point along the way. We'll talk a little bit about the types of business structures that lend themselves to taking on investors. Licensure, compliance, permits, these are things that every business has to deal with. So, and this can make or break your business whenever you're starting out. So you got to understand sort of the compliance environment that you are going to be engaging in. Contracts. Every business deals with contracts all the time. You can't avoid it as a business owner. So we're going to talk a little bit about things that you should know about business contracts. And then finally, fundraising, right? Fundraising for your startup, again, a key issue. And we'll be primarily focusing on bootstrapping, which is funding your business on your own, because that's the way a lot of folks start out. So we're going to talk a little bit about bootstrapping. So as usual, I probably have a whole lot more content than I have time. So I'm going to be moving through this stuff. Really, this is just an outline of things that you should be thinking about along the way. And any one of these are probably a great topic of a follow-on discussion with us or with a business attorney in your area. So let's get it up. Let's start off right off the bat. What is a startup, right? Because we use this term, we throw it around all the time. Let's just make sure that we're all on the same page. A startup is temporary, right? It can be a temporary business, right? Even a temporary business entity by its very nature. So, and it can also be a temporary status for your business, right? Because your status, even if the business that you formed is the one that you want to move forward with, your startup phase, right, can be temporary, because there's some things that happen in that startup phase that are different than any other phase of your business. And, a startup is really In Search Of, right? If you're a fan of Leonard Nimoy and that old show, and I'm dating myself, In Search Of, I loved that show. But a startup is really in search of a business model at the end of the day. That's really what a startup is all about. And it's in search of a business model that is repeatable, meaning you can do things over and over and over again, right? That is scalable. It's going to produce income and it can get bigger along the way and produce income reliably along the way. That's what a startup is, or a startup phase for your business is all about. So let's dive right into our agenda, and we're going to talk about step one, business planning. Just no way to avoid business planning along the way whenever you're getting ready to start your business. I have in front of you a really great tool for startup business owners, and it's called the Business Model Canvas. And uh, don't worry, if you're attending this video, we are going to send you after the video some links, and one of the links will allow you to download this business model canvas. Okay, but this is a great format that you should really be going through as a startup in order to fine tune whatever it is that you are trying to do, or what you hope to do, because it's going to help you learn a lot of different things that will help you find that business model that is repeatable and scalable. So let's sort of talk just a little bit about the various components of this business model canvas. And we start on the far right, top right, customer segments. Um, Really, you have to know who your customer is, right? Who is it for whom that you are creating value? Who is it that you are solving problems for? Those are your customers. At the end of the day, you have to know who they are. And in fact, you really want to be a little bit more specific about it and develop customer personas, right? What are the attributes of the ideal customer that you are trying to go after, in the marketplace? Who is your business really the intended audience it's going to be, right? Your customer segments might be different depending on your business. They may have different interests in your business. For example, if you are launching a blog of some kind, right? Some of your customers might be the audience, right? You're trying to provide services to them. Maybe even you're trying to sell something to them. But your other customers might be advertisers, right? If you're selling advertising, or companies, if you're an influencer of some kind, right? They're going to have a completely different set of needs that you're going to need to fulfill. So you have to identify who those folks are and what their needs are along the way. It's a very big factor in their business planning. Secondly, we move over to value propositions. Okay. And this really, when you talk about a value proposition, we're talking about um, what problems are you trying to solve for a customer that's out there? What is it? What service are you offering that solves a problem? What product are you producing that solves a problem for somebody, right? Babies spit up. That's a problem because it gets on your clothes. So maybe the problem that you're trying to solve is protecting your clothes, and you're going to make some kind of bibs or something like that, right? That's a very basic example of what that's all about. But what is the value proposition that you are trying to sell out there into those customers that you're looking for? A very important thing. And this is something that you really have to spend some time doing research on, going out into the marketplace, interviewing customers, talking to them about your product, figuring out if this has value to them, if it's something that they would spend money on, that they would see a value for out there. You're going to want to do some research on this, some R&D along the way, unless there's somebody else out there in the marketplace that is offering to solve the same problems or deliver on the same wants and desires of customers, and maybe you just are going to do it a little bit differently. or you have a better way or more efficient way to deliver the same product into the marketplace, right? There are lots of people out there who are making candles and selling them into the marketplace. So we know that there is a desire for candles in the marketplace. Maybe this person's just going to do it a little bit differently or serve a need in their community that is underserved. But that's the value proposition aspect of the business planning. Number three is channels, right? So through which channels are you going to reach the customers that you want? How are you going to reach them? Are you going to do it via email? Are you going to do it via advertising? Are you going to try to go into social media and deliver it all via social media and try to get some kind of a following there? Which of those is going to work best for the value proposition that you're trying to deliver, and where are your customers looking that you want to be, right? You want to have a place for. Maybe your customer segment is the faith-based community. And where is the faith-based community? What channels are they in already that you want to be in order to communicate with them? Maybe that's on faith-based radio advertising or television or print media or websites or something like that. That's sort of the idea that you're going to be um, putting down in these boxes, right? You'll see this if you'll see presentations online about this business model canvas, people will tell you that you should really have sticky notes, that you're going to be writing things on sticky notes and putting them in these boxes, and you're going to try those things out along the way. And the process of business planning using this model canvas is trial and error, right? And as you plan, you're going to create a series of these business model canvases. You're going to modify them based upon the things that you learn, the mistakes that you make, the sales that really don't go over, the products that you may want to launch out there that nobody has any particular interest in, that you have to modify a little bit. As you work through your planning process, you are going to create several different iterations or variations of this business model canvas that are all a little bit different. And when you're done, you're going to look back on them and it's going to sort of tell the development story of where you started, the mistakes that you made, the learnings that you also benefited from, and how you had to change your business model your canvas, your planning canvas, right? In order to get to a business model that is repeatable and scalable. So customer relationships is number four, right? What type of relationships do you want to have with your customers? That's going to be a very important determination for you. The more personal the relationship is with your customers one-on-one, right? Your customer relationships all happen on the golf course, right? If that's how your business is going to grow, it's not going to be very scalable because there's only so much time that you have to spend that much time with those customers. You're not going to be able to have a whole lot of customers, right, along the way. Um, Now, if it is less personal, right, it's more automated, maybe it's personalized automated, meaning email marketing or marketing through social media that is delivered into certain channels based upon customer characteristics, then it's going to be a little bit more scalable. But you have to decide what type of customer relationships that you want to have. Next, we talk about revenue streams, right? What are your customers willing to pay for the value proposition that you are delivering? And how do they prefer to pay for that, right? You can have a lot of businesses out there that have a great idea, but don't succeed because they make it difficult for their customers to pay for the service or the product that is. You have a limited way of accepting payments. I think you will find that you probably need to make it easy to get all that friction out of the way so that you make it as easy as possible for your customers to pay for the product or service that it is that you're delivering. Sixth, we have key resources, right? what are the things that you need to have? What are the key resources that you need in order to deliver the value proposition? What are the elements, right? What are the ingredients? Certainly cash, funding, your business is probably going to need, but do you need a physical space, or can you just be a virtual business? Are you going to need a trademark in order to really deliver your value proposition? People that you need, those types of things. What are the key resources in order to make your engine go? Related to that are key activities, right? What are the things that you have to be really good at in order to deliver your value proposition? What are the activities that you need to be able to execute and be engaged in that are crucial for the success of your business? You have to be really good at those types of things. If you want to open up you want to be an esthetician and you want to open up a studio like that, you're going to have to be really good at providing those types of services, or nobody is going to come back to you. So that's going to be something that you need to be focused on. You might need to really have the tools of the trade in order to deliver the scope of services that folks that are looking for an esthetician is wanting to do, right? If you don't have all of the tools and you can only deliver one type of a service, then you're probably going to be at a disadvantage when it comes to competing businesses. So, what are the activities and resources that you are going to need in order to be successful? Key partners, right? Is the number 8. You can't do everything yourself, and most businesses don't do everything in-house, right? So who are the key partners that you're going to need in order to for your business model to function efficiently? I think every small business to some extent they need IT services, they need accounting or bookkeeping, billing, legal services, payroll, supplies, suppliers. These are all partners that you may need to acquire and identify in order for your business model to be repeatable and scalable, especially when you're starting out. You can't do all of that stuff necessarily internally, right? Some of them you might have to in order to save money, especially if you're bootstrapping your business with your own money. But at some point along the way, you're going to have to identify key partners out there that are going to help your business. Having a banking relationship, developing a banking relationship is going to be, I think a bank is going to at some point be a key partner for your business. And then finally, after you've figured out all of this other stuff, then you're in a place where you can figure out what your cost structure is. Okay. What does it cost you to deliver the value that it is that you're doing? And are you getting a return, right? Is there a profitable return to your business? I can't tell you how many business owners I talk to that don't understand their costs of producing whatever it is that they're producing. Just had a conversation last week with someone who runs a daycare and doesn't understand what their cost per student is. That was a foreign concept to that person. I don't know how you can make money if you don't know what the cost of production is for whatever it is that you are doing. So, step 1, business planning, right? Very important for a startup, but you can use this model. It doesn't matter where you are in the life cycle of your business. If you are thinking about branching out into a new business or offering a new product, offering a new service along the way, you can see how this would be a very useful tool in doing the planning around that new idea or that new service or that new product that you want to offer out there. This is a very, very helpful tool to use no matter where you are in the life cycle of your business. So why don't we move on to step 2 in our agenda, and let's talk a little bit about business partners, because you might be thinking about taking on a business partner. Maybe you just have an idea that you've shared with a friend, and the idea is that the both of you are going to go into business together on this, right? So there are some things that I'm going to suggest to you that you are going to want to talk a little bit about or to consider before you move forward and take on a business partner, right? It's a good idea, I think, before you get in bed with somebody, so to speak, to surface any potential disagreements that you might have going forward, or identify problems before you're too in deep, right? So you can think about this like getting married, right? Your pastor probably said, I want you to come in and let's have some pre-marriage sessions to talk about this type of stuff. So you have a better foundation to enter into that marriage, and you know what's coming, and you will have already been prepared for it. You will already have talked about some of those things. The last thing that you want to find out after you got married is she wants to have kids and you don't. That's definitely something that you want to talk about, ahead of time, so to speak. So first thing, do you even need a partner, right? What is this? Why are you bringing a partner on, right? Your partner really should have some skills or experience that you lack, right? Or that you need in the short term that you can't acquire for a little while. They have to be a good fit for you, right? Along the way. You got to bring something to the table in order, I think, for you to really consider whether you want to take, that partner on. What's your partner's financial position? I think this is also something that is a key factor for you to be thinking about along the way, right? Does your partner have financial resources that they can contribute to the business, at least at the very outset, which could be super key if you are bootstrapping your business, or at some point along the way to get you over the hump, right? Before you have some revenue coming in from the functioning of your business model. Maybe they have something else that they can contribute, like a piece of equipment that you need, or they've got some know-how that is really crucial to the operation of your business that you are lacking, or some type of major connection that is going to be crucial to operating your business, a connection to a key a key resource or a key partner of some kind. But what's their financial position? If they've got debt problems, if they aren't going to be credit worthy along the way, I think you're going to find that that's going to end up being a problem for you one way or the other. And it's better for you to flush that out sooner rather than later. Um, I think really another important thing to talk about is, what does success look like to you, right? You want to be generally aligned on values, right? But where do you see this business in 1 year or in 5 years? What's the ultimate I made it moment look like, to you? And, how much failure do each of you have the stomach for, right, along the way? Because there's going to be failure along the way. Maybe what's the timeline of success? But having this conversation, I think, can be very, very important for potential business partners to have. Are you aligned on your respective commitments to the business, right? That could be as simple as, how many hours do each of you expect the other to devote to the business on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, right? Um, there is no factor that can get two business partners crossways with one another when other than somebody saying, I'm doing all the work, and the other person isn't really pulling their weight along the way. You're really better off having that conversation right up front. This is what we're each going to commit to this business on a regular basis in order to make it achieve success. What are going to be your respective roles and responsibilities in that business? Who's going to do what? What are you each responsible for? How do you function? What do you think your functional role is in the business? Something to really be talking about. And how do you see that role changing as the business scales up, right? Do they just want to be the CEO person and delegating all of the tasks? Or are they the type of business owner that is prepared to roll up their sleeves and be working very actively in the business for the foreseeable future? Those are going to be two completely different types of mindsets that each of you are going to potentially have. You want to be aligned in those things. And some other key issues that potential business partners should be talking about is, what are each of you going to contribute to the business up front, right? Is it you each putting in the equal amount of money, or maybe each of you is putting something different in, but you're agreed that they have relatively equal value. Or maybe it's an unequal contribution, and that has to be reflected in your respective equity or ownership interest in the business. It doesn't always have to be equal. It can be unequal, but if it is unequal, it's good that each of you agree that it's unequal and to what extent, so that there's an alignment of those contributions and whatever your equity interest is in the business, right? Um, will how are you going to get paid out of the business? Are you going to be drawing a salary out of the business? Are you going to be paid wages over and above profit? How are you going to pull money out of the business? How are you going to get paid back for loans that you make to the business? And what's the pecking order of getting paid? Do the loans get paid back first before anybody gets paid anything else? What are the terms of those loans, right? How's the business going to be managed on a day-to-day basis? So how does decision making get made? Do you have to be all in agreement, unanimous on every decision that gets made, or do each of you have authority to make decisions on behalf of the business without consulting with the other? And if so, what is the sphere, what is the scope of that authority, right? Is it authority for certain subject matters? Maybe it's authority up to a dollar value. You know, it could be a lot of different things, but what are your respective scopes of authority? And how will you resolve disputes? Because believe me when I tell you that there is, just like there is no marriage that doesn't have problems, right? There is no business marriage, right? That's what a business partnership is, that doesn't have problems at some point along the way. So number one, agreeing and having these discussions is going to go a long way to helping you avoid problems whenever they do come up, right? Or to mitigate the impact of problems whenever they do come up. Getting aligned and having these discussions ahead of time is really going to help you avoid those types of issues. But they are bound to turn up at some point along the way. How are you going to resolve disputes? This is especially important for businesses that have 50-50 partners, right? Because it just invites deadlock. How are you going to break a deadlock along the way? Having some type of mechanism of resolving that is really important, because your business could be deadlocked and go nowhere if the two of you aren't in agreement on something. It could prevent the business from advancing beyond that stage. So that's step two. We talked about partnerships. Let's move on to the next part of our agenda, where we talk about legal structures. This is also something that is a key factor or a key decision that you have to make whenever you are getting ready to form your startup. And maybe it's something that happens after you're beyond the idea stage. It should probably happen after you're beyond that planning stage. I've talked to many folks who want to form a business entity of some kind, and I almost always ask them, where are you at in your planning process, right? Do you have a business plan written? Have you gone through this business model canvas? What plans have you made? What do you intend to do? And it's not uncommon at all for folks to say, I want to form a business entity without having spent very much time in that planning process. And I always encourage them to forget about forming the business entity and spend more time on the planning process before they drop a dime to form an LLC or a corporation or whatever it is. That should really happen, I think, when they have a better idea of where they're really going in that startup process along their way to finding a business model that is repeatable and scalable. But when that time comes to make a decision about the legal structure, here are some common um, uh, here's some common business structures that folks will typically choose from. First is a sole proprietorship, right? The pros are very simple, right? There's really no filing of any kind to start a sole proprietorship. You can do that, just start operating your business. It's not unusual for people to do that. So there's low cost and there's virtually no formalities at all about forming a sole proprietorship. Maybe you file a fictitious name. Maybe you just have a DBA that you come up with doing business as for your business. The problems are that there's no liability protection for your personal assets for claims that arise out of operating your business, right? No liability protection. So, you know, doing business as a sole proprietorship means all of your personal assets are exposed to the risks that arise out of operating your business. In addition, you might have limited access to capital. You might be able to get a loan for your business, but you're going to have to pledge your personal assets as security. And you certainly won't get anybody investing in your business if you are a sole proprietorship, because you really can't give them ownership of a sole proprietorship, right? There's nothing to give them in return for their capital that they're investing in your business. So sole proprietorship, very, very limited way to operate your business. The next is a limited liability company, right? This is very, very common. We almost exclusively form limited liability companies for startups and folks that are wanting to be in business for themselves or a small business, right? They're relatively simple to form. And they do give you some protection for your personal assets against the risks that arise out of the operation of your business. There are some limitations to that, right? And the way that you operate your business can certainly weaken the liability protection that an LLC can give you for your business. And there are lots of articles on our website at fiffiklaw.com about the things that you can do to weaken the liability protection that an LLC gives you. The LLC is also very flexible from an organizational structure and gives you lots of choices from a tax perspective. So they can be very good for a small business owner. There are some cons to be aware of, right? Profits can the profits arising out of the business can produce taxable income without cash distributions to the members. So the most LLCs are what are called pass-through tax entities, meaning that the profits, the income from the business pass through to the owners in proportion to their ownership interest. But that doesn't mean that there's going to be cash distributed to the members to cover that tax liability. So that can be an unhappy thing unless you have built into your operating agreement a requirement that the LLC distribute enough cash so that the members can cover their tax liability. There is no there are limits on guaranteed payments to just purely investors, people that aren't working in the business. They've just invested in the business and they have an ownership interest in it. There are limits on guaranteed payments that can be made to them under the rules. The rules relating to LLCs vary by state, right? They're going to be different. Every state has their own LLC statute, and in many respects, the rules are probably the same, but in some significant respects, they're different in various states. So, from an investor's perspective, an outside investor's perspective, they may not be so interested in an LLC, investing in LLCs, because they're all going to have different rules that apply to them. And so they're not an ideal business formation or choice for a business entity if you're looking at some point along the way to secure some type of outside private investment of some kind. They're not very good. So they're great if you're operating a business and you really don't plan on taking really any outside investors at all. So for most small business owners, this is a great choice. But if you're going to be looking for some kind of angel investor out there or private equity company of some kind to invest in your business, this is really not the entity choice for you. The next is partnerships, right? And there are different types of partnerships out there. They can be very simple to form. In fact, you don't even need to file anything with the state in order to have a partnership, right? You don't even need a written agreement in order to have a partnership. If you own a piece of property with another person that's unrelated to you, guess what? You've got a partnership, um, for all intents and purposes. Now, that doesn't mean that that's a good thing to do. You really should have a written agreement if you're going to have a partner in any endeavor, but a partnership can be relatively easy to form. A general partnership offers, again, no protection for your personal assets arising out of the operation of your business. So that can be a downside. But it offers the opportunity for a flexible structure and flexible tax rules. Not quite as flexible as LLCs, but it's a pass-through tax entity. Now, the downsides, you have to have at least two owners in order to have a partnership. I guess that probably stands to reason, but you're going to have two or more owners. If you want limited liability protection, then you're going to have to file, probably with your state regulator, to have some type of a limited liability partnership to protect your personal assets from risks arising out of your business. And again, profits can produce taxable income without tax distributions unless that's required as part of your partnership agreement. And this is also a business entity that is not ideal for securing private investment, out there from the angel investors or private equity of some kind. Just not an ideal. They're not looking to invest in partnerships, but it can be a perfectly fine business entity for a small business owner, perhaps family business owners of some kind, in order to use this as their business entity. It's perfectly fine for folks like that. So let's talk about corporations. And this is going to be a bit of a mash between two different types of corporations that have two different types of tax elections. Okay. So out there, you may hear a term S Corp, right? An S Corp is just a corporation that is elected S status for purposes of taxes, right? That's an election that you file with the IRS to be taxed a certain way as a corporation. It's not a type of a corporation. It's a corporation that has elected that tax status. The default status for tax purposes is a C corporation, but they're both corporations under state law. It's just that they have different tax status. And then there are different rules that apply to them that are ancillary to that choice of tax status. Now, corporations offer protection for personal assets, probably the same way the limited liability companies do. I think that's generally understood under the law. An S election for a corporation allows profits and losses to pass through to the owner's tax returns. Okay. The S corporation is therefore a good choice for startups and early stage companies because they're going to have losses that they may want to be able to pass through to themselves to use against any of their other taxable income. And you can elect out of the S status every year by March 15th. So they can change that tax status at some point along the way when it makes sense for them for whatever the business purpose is. And one of those business purposes might be that they're looking to attract outside investors, right? And outside investors are going to be looking for a C corporate status for purposes of investment. That's going to be their ideal, and especially if the business is formed as a Delaware corporation. Now, there are some downsides to electing that S status as well. You can have a limited number of shareholders, and there are going to be some restrictions on equity rules, voting rules, profit sharing rules that come along with that. So there's less flexibility with S corporations that are, and that lack of flexibility is an attribute that is not something that outside investors are looking for. So again, you can start up as and elect that S status to get those losses that pass through and some of those other tax benefits. And then you can elect out of that in the event that you want to attract some type of outside investors. But those are the basic legal structures that are available. Again, which of these you choose really depends on the goals that you're trying to achieve, what you envision as your ownership structure going forward, where your funding is coming from. So, I wouldn't say that any one is always the right choice over another. I will say that LLCs are by far the most prevalent business structure that I see, other than sole proprietorships. There are a lot of those out there too. And corporations are less common. But again, if you're going to be looking for some type of outside investment at some point along the way, a corporation is probably where you want to be, or at some point you want to be if you are looking to get beyond the startup stage. So we've now covered legal structures. Let's move into our next topic, and that is licensure and compliance, right? This is, again, licensure and compliance is going to be something that virtually every business is going to have to deal with to some extent or the other, because when you operate a business, it's going to be regulated in some way. And you just have to understand what that regulatory environment is and what it's going to require of you before you try to start operating your business, right? They're going to be licensures, permits, regulations that are going to be applicable to your business. They're going to be on the federal, the state, and the local level. I know that that seems onerous and perhaps bewildering and just too much to deal with at the outset. And to some extent, that's true, but you'll get it. I mean, you'll understand where you're going from, and there is some help in this regard. Now, let's talk a little bit about a common federal level licenses and permits, right? If you're operating in any one of these businesses, general businesses, you're going to probably need some type of uh, federal licensure or permit of some kind or another, right? And some of these I think are probably make sense, right? Your investment advisor is probably is going to have some type of licensure or some type of approvals or certifications in order to sell securities, things of that nature along the way. Food manufacturing, you're going to have to comply with regulations from the Food and Drug Administration for the health department for the process, the ingredients, the labeling. You're going to have to comply with those types of things. So you'll have to be aware of what those requirements are before you begin operating your business and understand what kind of addition to your cost structure that really means. State level, this is going to be almost every business is going to have some type of a state level licensure or regulation. Sales and use tax, right? If you're selling retail products, you're going to need a sales license of some kind. You and if you're incorporating things in a construction world and you're reselling, you might have a use tax, right? So sales and use tax are sort of the flip side of one another, but sales tax is something that you definitely want to pay attention to and make sure that you understand when you're required to collect it, because you are collecting it on behalf of the government. It's a trustee type tax that you're collecting. If you don't collect it and pay it to the government, you're going to owe it, right? Your failure to collect it is going to be potentially your own personal liability as a business owner. So you're going to want to understand that, right? But, states have their own agricultural requirements. Here are some other common licenses that I see out there. Child care facilities are going to need some state licensure as well, and perhaps local. Home care businesses will require licensure. Home improvement contractors, that's an area that I think is missed by a lot of contractors out there who have experience doing home improvement work, but they don't really understand the regulatory environment that they have to comply with. They need to be licensed in Pennsylvania and probably licensed in most states in order to do home improvement, and in some states, even commercial work. Professional services, attorneys, realtors, accountants, any type of a medical practice, cosmetology, all require licensure and approvals. If you're in liquor sales of some kind, if you're selling liquor like a restaurant or a brewery, These are all things that you're going to need state level licensure for. And we can't overlook local licenses and permits. Again, they're going to be local health department regulations that apply to restaurants, food trucks. That's a big thing that folks are doing right now. If you're in the construction business, you're going to have to be paying attention to zoning, building permits, approvals for plumbing, any hazmat abatement, vending. There are a lot of licenses. Some municipalities have just a general business license that you have to apply for if you're located or doing business in that municipality. So you're going to want to double check on those types of things. The good news is that most states have what I would refer to as a one-stop shop that you can get some help to identify the licensures that you're going to have to comply with. And probably your local municipality or city is also going to have something similar to that. So they're going to tell you as a small business owner what you have to apply for in order to be legal and doing business. Other compliance matters that almost all small businesses have to be aware of. Insurance, right? Now, it's a good idea for you to have insurance, just as a general good business practice, to have insurance to cover whatever the risks are arising out of your business. But for some types of business, you are required to have insurance. Home improvement contractors are required to have liability insurance as a condition of doing business. But if you have employees, you're going to have workers' comp insurance you're required to have. If you don't do that, or if you've misclassified your employees as independent contractors and they get injured, that's going to be a big problem for you if you don't have workers' comp insurance to cover them. The state will eventually potentially come after you. But if you do have employees, if you have workers that are performing services for your business, the first order of business is to determine whether they should be classified as independent contractors or employees. That'll probably be the topic of our webinar next month. So make a note to tune in to that webinar next month. But you'll have to comply with wage and hour laws, the Fair Labor Standards Act. You'll have to collect and remit payroll taxes and unemployment compensation and deal with those claims. So these are all other license and compliance requirements for small businesses. So let's move on to our next topic, and that's best contract practices or contract best practices, right? Every business, regardless of its size or type of customers, relies on contracts to function. It's just a matter of doing business. Here are some examples. Co-owner contracts. You have a contract with a co-owner of your business. If you have a partner, it's called your operating agreement or your bylaws or your partnership agreement. Whatever it is, you're going to have a contract that governs your relationship with your co-owners as well as your respective relationships with the business. If you take on an investor, you'll have a contract. You'll have customer contract, vendor contract, supplier contracts, lending, leasing, personal guarantees, big one, right? These are all types of contracts that every business owner is going to have at some point along the way. It's just inevitable. So you have to have some good understanding of contract best practices. Key terms in any type of a contract that you have. You got to identify the parties who the contract speaks to, who's going to be obligated, who has rights under this contract. The scope of work, whatever it is that you're doing or the product that you're offering needs to be described. What your respective roles and responsibilities are in this relationship, who's doing what and when. How are you allocating risk between the two of you as it relates to this endeavor? What are the payment terms, right? How much is being paid? When does it have to be paid? And how does it have to be paid? Very basic stuff. When and under what circumstances can you terminate the relationship between you and the other party to this contract? And if something goes wrong, if somebody breaches the contract, what remedies are available for those types of breaches? These are basic key terms that should be part of the vast majority of contracts. Now, I see a lot of business contracting mistakes out there, and some of these are going to seem like no duh, right? But number one, not having a written contract. probably the number one contracting mistake that I see is not having a contract at all. It really happens a lot. Second is wrong person signs the contract, right? You're a home improvement contractor and you have a contract signed to work on a property, except the property is owned by spouses and you only got one of them to sign it. You might have a difficult time enforcing that contract against both of those parties. You're going to have problems with that. That's a very common example of having the wrong person sign the contract, right? Retaining fully executed copies. I can't tell you how many business owners, when something has gone sideways, they send me a copy of the contract that they have with the customer, except it's either completely unsigned or it's only signed by one of them. They don't have good practices to maintain this documentation or ensure that they get it signed before they start doing the work. That can be a real problem if you're trying to enforce your rights under the contract. Lack of clarity, big problem. Deadlines, big problem, right? It's not unusual at all for business owners who are trying to write contracts on their own to really make mistakes in not being clear on exactly what they're doing and importantly, what they're not doing, right? What the scope of work includes and what it does not include, because that can lead to a lot of misunderstandings with customers, and what the deadlines are. When's the job supposed to be done? When's the product supposed to be delivered? When is payment due? Under what circumstances? These are all things that need to be really set forth very clearly in the contract in order for them to be enforceable. Um, Losing sight of the forest for the trees. And this is my way of saying a lot of folks think that the four corners of the contract is all that they need to worry about. I've got a contract, therefore I'm going to be able to enforce it, when that's not really the case, right? You have to understand what the finances are behind the other person to that contract so that you can understand whether you're going to be able to enforce it or not, or how they can undermine that contract by things that are outside the scope of whatever is in fact in the contract itself. You can sign a contract with a business that has no assets. Guess what? That contract is basically not worth the paper that it's written on if that business isn't going to have to stand behind the contract financially, or that they can assign that contract to another business entity that has no money. You have to understand that kind of stuff behind contracting as well. That's what I call losing sight of the forest for the trees and thinking that you've got something that is gold, right? When you've got this signed agreement, but it's something that can be easily avoided because of other factors that are extraneous to the contract itself. And this is very common. Dispute resolution is either entirely lacking in the contract, entirely missing, or it's just lacking, right? That the parties really haven't agreed on the method and manner in which disputes between the two of them are going to get resolved. So those are some contracting mistakes that we see very commonly. So let's move on to our final topic, which is fundraising. I call it bootstrapping, right? Let's really launching your business using your own personal savings. This is how many, many, many businesses get started, right? This might include funding from your retirement accounts, right? You can actually use your retirement accounts to start a business or fund a business. It might involve investment from family and friends. Maybe it could even include some revenue generated by the business itself, right? Here's the good parts of bootstrapping. You're in complete control. Your money, your control. You make all the decisions, right? It may also promote financial discipline because you've got limited resources, so you have to spend them a little bit more wisely. You can't, you can't overspend. So you're going to be watching your pennies, so to speak, because it's your money, right? Or maybe a very, very limited number of people that have a vested interest in the business. You can kind of make decisions pretty rapidly along the way, as opposed to having to get some type of approvals from other types of investors that maybe have reserved the ability to have veto power over some significant decisions that you're making with your business. The downsides are you got some financial risk, right? Your money is on the line. And so if the business fails, you lose your money. You've got limited resources, so it might inhibit your ability to grow the business. So you're going to have slower growth, or you might, have to do more things yourself as opposed to finding partners that can help you and get you advanced a lot faster. You might not be able to scale up quite as quickly because you can't afford to buy materials to manufacture products to meet your demand, or you can't afford to hire the human capital necessary to provide services to your customers to meet the demand. And you might be doing more yourself when you're bootstrapping your business, and you get burnout, right? Because you're just trying to do too many things, and you just get tired along the way. So as we're getting close to time here, final thoughts for startups. Don't skip the planning. I mean, it's really, really important along the way. I can't tell you how important it is to get that planning done. You can avoid a lot of problems. Start small and validate your idea, right? Don't spend a whole lot of money hoping that your idea is going to work. You really need to test and get out there and really figure out if it's going to work or not. Focus on cash flow, right? So keep your expenses low, and try to produce cash flow to the extent that you're able along the way. Learn new skills to save some money. The more that you can do yourself, the more money that you don't have to spend on key partners out there, at least at the outset, the more money you have to plow into developing your product or your service and delivering value to your potential customers. And then finally, leverage networking and mentoring opportunities. I mean, I often say I've never had an original idea in my entire life. That's probably true. And you don't have to either. So again, you don't have to make all the mistakes yourself. I mean, people think that that's a laudable thing to learn from your mistakes. It's more smarter to avoid the mistakes along the way. And if you're networking and you're mentoring, not only can you learn from others and avoid some mistakes, but you might also make connections that will connect you with customers or key partners or new ideas or new directions to take your product or your service that can really unlock things for your business model along the way. So that's what I have to offer for you today. Let me take a look at some questions that we have, Claire.